Welcome everyone to week 7 of our course, and by now you're almost completed with the steps of a watered down curriculum. And I say that because there's absolutely no way that we can go into depth and complete a full applicable curriculum in the amount of time that we have for our course. But I'm sure you've struggled through some of the steps, maybe became frustrated at others and found yourself confused at some points. And if you haven't, you're either a professional at curriculum development or you didn't work too hard at completing the steps. And this is all part of the process. Much of your learning is what we call exploratory, which is working with your curricular team to try to make sense of each one of these steps and determine how each one applies to you and your specific job situation and responsibilities. For this week, you will complete step number 10, developing yearly teaching and learning maps. And for this step, we're not going to follow the exact same process that are outlined in the text, but we will cover the same concepts. In step 10, the idea is to plan exactly how and when you're going to meet all of your objectives within the instructional year. Typically, physical education instruction is guided by traditional or organized team sports. And this is when early in the fall, teachers will always begin with volleyball skills. Rather than spend time teaching skills of volleyball, they focus on the game of volleyball because teachers want to rush into that game situation. And what usually happens is in a 3-week block or a 3-week unit, there are about 2 weeks of these rushed drills, not necessarily skills, and then there's that 1 week of gameplay. Well, the yearly teaching and learning map is developed to help focus on specific objectives within your program. So all of the work you previously completed should be addressed in the final planning of your program curriculum. And now that you know how much time you should be spending on a particular goal, your yearly teaching and learning map should take that into consideration. Now, there's not one specific or one correct method of developing a yearly teaching and learning map, but within your plan, you should try to account for 3 different things. Number 1, when you plan to introduce the core content and objectives. Number 2, when you plan to reinforce those concepts. And number 3, when and how you plan to assess the concepts or determine what students have learned. And if you're following the alignment of your curriculum process from philosophy to sequencing the content, then your focus should be on the mastery of the content rather than just exposing students to what that content is. And this means that all of your instruction should be deliberate in reaching the mastery level of your objectives. You should spend the necessary time that students need to reach that mastery. And of course, all of the objectives should be aligned to the goals. So for this step, there are a couple of areas to address. First, there's a written reflection thought process. So think about how traditional physical education is taught or how you personally have experienced physical education instruction in the past. If you've always taught or experienced it as a sports-focused curriculum, which means teaching each sport by season, why do you think that's the case? What is the reasoning or justification behind doing that? Is it just because it's a tradition? Is it because you want to have that sports focus? Think about the rationale behind why that's done. Oftentimes, following this approach encourages what we call role conflict, where coaches tend to conduct a physical education class as a sports team rather than a physical education class. And this is also when the majority of the class is run by a sport-related drill that athletes typically perform rather than developing skills and the mechanics and the understanding towards actual movement. So the first part of your step 10 is a written reflection addressing some thoughtful questions. And these also include the pros and cons of traditional approaches to teaching physical education, the advantages, the limitations, the time involved in teaching, the focus on instruction, and even the outcome, whether or not students have actually learned anything. So basically, you will respond to the question, what makes your program yearly teaching and learning map different from a traditional method? And just address those questions that are listed in the written guidelines. The second part of step 10 is to develop a calendar which outlines what objectives will be taught and when they'll be taught. And this is basically a visual map or plan of your entire school year. Now, for coaches and those who are focusing on an athletic program, this is going to require some critical thinking. Coaches, you're going to have to take another look at your objectives. And since you are focusing on a sport-specific or an athletic program, you'll need to determine what you will focus on and at which point in your yearly plan you're going to address certain things. You may want to integrate many of your objectives within the daily practice session rather than address them separately, but this should be clear from your yearly teaching and learning map. So here's an example of a calendar. Now, let me stress that this is only a general example. I don't provide detailed specific examples because students simply copy the example without thinking for themselves. And I want you to develop something more specific, more detailed, more in depth, which includes the entire school year and your program. So basically, this provides a general guide as to what goals and objectives will be taught and when. And the calendar is color-coded for the days of the week. So you can see in this example, the first couple of weeks are set aside to address social skills and review program rules. And by the way, this is also revisited in the week following Christmas break. So you'll develop a similar, more detailed calendar, of course, with the days of the week identified, covering your entire school year. And if you are addressing multiple skills or concepts, for example, during a week when you're focusing on the cognitive domain and addressing critical thinking skills, maybe giving a test or some assessments, you may also try to integrate social skills. Be sure you identify this along with the goals and objectives that are being addressed in your program. Everything should be aligned with all of your previously developed curriculum steps, meaning you should only include those concepts that you've previously addressed. So if there's something that's not in your curriculum that you think it's important, but you found out you didn't have time to include it in there, it should not be included in your learning map. So that's a quick rundown of step number 2 of your curriculum development process. Don't forget to complete the meeting minutes form for any time that your group has discussed this week's assignments. Also this week, you have your threaded discussion to complete. Remember to post your initial response by Tuesday and then respond to 2 of your classmates by Thursday of this week. And lastly, complete your quiz number 4 by Sunday at 11:55, and this will follow the same format as all the previous quizzes. As usual, if you have any questions, any concerns, if anything's vague or confusing to you, please do not hesitate to contact me. Take care, and we will see you online.